Did you know that one of the most daring moments of World War II began with a mission that seemed impossible? Amid the chaos left by the attack on Pearl Harbor, a group of American pilots embarked on an operation that would change the course of the war and shake Japan's confidence. Today, you will discover how Lieutenant Colonel James Harold Doolittle's attack transformed the Pacific setting and proved that even the greatest empires have weaknesses. Let's dive behind the scenes of this iconic mission. From the strategic planning that defied logic to the sacrifices of the heroes who risked everything. What's more, you will understand how these actions shaped the American war and left timeless lessons about courage, leadership, and overcoming. If you like fascinating true stories of war, full of clever strategies and world-changing twists, stay with us. This video is not just a historical account. It is an invitation to see the impact of bold decisions in times of crisis. Prepare to be inspired by a story that proves that even the impossible can be achieved. On December 7, 1941, the peaceful morning in Hawaii was shattered by the deafening roar of Japanese planes attacking Pearl Harbor. The explosions, screams, and chaos made it clear America was at war. The destruction of ships and planes deeply shook American morale. It was as if a sleeping giant had been hit, but he was still groggy. The attack was not just a physical blow, but a psychological one, showing that even oceanic distance was not a guarantee of safety. The American response, however, was not one of resignation. Franklin Roosevelt, known for his strategic vision and inspiring oratory, declared, "A day that will live in infamy." But words would not be enough to restore the people's confidence or send a clear message to Japan. Action needed to be taken. It was at this moment that the idea of a bold retaliation was born, something that would defy the odds and reignite the American spirit. In the Pacific scenario, Japan dominated the war board like a master strategist. Control of the Philippines, Malaysia, and parts of China consolidated its position. For the Americans, it seemed impossible to break this siege. And yet there was one question that no one in high command could ignore. Was it possible to strike directly at the heart of Japan? Something that showed Japanese leaders that their movements would not go unpunished. Newspapers at the time painted a grim picture, highlighting loss upon loss on the battlefields of the Pacific. But amid this sea of pessimism, rumors of a big mission in planning began to emerge. American strategists knew that the attack would not need to cause massive destruction. His true goal was psychological, to prove that Japan was not invulnerable. The path to this answer, however, would not be simple. The idea of an air raid on Tokyo seemed absurd to many. After all, the United States was still reorganizing its fleet and air force. But the greatest achievements in history always begin with doubt, don't they? Behind the closed doors of the Pentagon, discussions were heated. The mission that would come to be known as the Doolittle Raid began to take shape, a plan so audacious that many would consider it suicidal. The plan was bold: attack Tokyo, the heart of Japan, with American bombers. However, there was one obvious problem: distance. The battlefields in the Pacific did not offer an air base close enough to carry out such an operation. This is where American military creativity shined. The idea of using B-25 Mitchell bombers launched from an aircraft carrier emerged as the ideal solution, something never attempted before. But let's face it, no one imagined it would be easy. Choosing the Mitchell B-25s was no accident. They were robust, versatile, and most importantly, light enough to take off from an aircraft carrier. However, Japan was not just a distant target, it was also heavily protected. Overcoming this barrier would require not only well-prepared machines, but also a team of strategists and pilots willing to challenge the impossible. That's when Lieutenant Colonel James Harold Doolittle entered the scene, a man whose courage and intelligence made him the ideal leader. Doolittle was known for his charisma and boldness. Not only did he understand the complexities of aerial combat, but he also knew how to inspire his teams. Doolittle's choice was not just technical, but symbolic. He represented American hope and determination at a time when the country needed to believe in something greater. As leader, Doolittle knew that the success of the mission would not only depend on technology, but on the morale of the crews. The strategic planning was thorough. The mission would be conducted under extreme conditions, with the bombers launched hundreds of kilometers ahead of schedule if necessary, due to the possibility of encounters with enemy patrols. Every detail was thought of, from alternative routes to escape strategies after the attack. The battlefield would not only be in the air, but also in the minds of those involved. How to avoid failure when everything seemed to conspire against you. The element of surprise was essential to success. Even with the logistical challenges and pressure, there was a common conviction among the strategists. It was a risk worth taking. After all, this was not just a military operation, but a blow to Japanese confidence and a signal to the world that the United States was ready to fight. Little did they know that the attack would change not only the course of the war, but also the tactics of aerial combat forever. For the Doolittle Raid to be viable, the B-25 Mitchell bombers needed drastic adjustments. The aircraft, originally designed to take off from conventional runways, would need to be optimized for launching from an aircraft carrier. To achieve this, extra fuel tanks were installed, significantly increasing its autonomy. In return, unnecessary weight, such as gun turrets, was removed. Even fake machine guns were placed, a trick to confuse enemies in combat. The training of pilots and crews was equally rigorous. They practiced takeoffs at absurdly short distances, simulating the limitations of the USS Hornet. They also trained low flyers to evade Japanese radars and refined their precision in low-altitude bombings. Imagine yourself in these men's shoes, learning to fly under conditions that seem to defy physics. Each training session was not just preparation, but a test of resilience and courage. Psychological preparation was also crucial. The men knew that this mission had no guarantee of return. Doolittle, as a leader, worked to create an unwavering sense of purpose among the team. He reminded them that the attack was not just a military mission, but a symbol for millions of Americans who needed hope. On this journey, examples of sacrifice inspired each soldier to commit to success even in the face of uncertainty. The battlefield required more than skill. It required creativity. To deceive the Japanese, the Americans used ingenious strategies, such as simulated flights to test enemy defenses. These details may seem small, but they are fundamental in any war strategy. Just like in chess, every move counts. And here the Americans were planning a psychological checkmate even before the first bombing. Finally, the atmosphere of camaraderie was evident. Although the pressure was overwhelming, the unity among the crew created an environment of trust. It was as if each training session was a collective reaffirmation that they were ready for something bigger than themselves. This mix of technique, courage, and mental preparation made the Doolittle Raid one of the most inspiring operations in military history. And what was to come would be a true test of this preparation. On April 18, 1942, the USS Hornet sailed across the Pacific under gray skies, carrying a weight beyond the 16 B-25 Mitchell aircraft on its deck. The moment for takeoff came earlier than planned. After an encounter with Japanese patrol ships, the decision to leave immediately was bold, but necessary. Doolittle led the launch, and the bombers took off from runway so short that each meter seemed like an eternity. The roar of the engines marked the start of the mission. Targets included military and industrial facilities in Tokyo, Kobe, and Nagoya. Despite the adverse conditions, the crews remained focused. Imagine the tension of flying over heavily guarded enemy territory, with every second feeling like an eternity. The impact of the bombs was limited in material terms, but the psychological effect was devastating. It was as if the Americans had shown Japan that even its skies were not untouchable. The challenges did not end after the attacks. The original plan was for the bombers to head to China, where they would land safely. However, many faced storms, fuel shortages, and inaccurate directions. Some pilots had to make forced landings while others parachuted over unfamiliar terrain. This final stage of the operation revealed how thin the line is between success and disaster in a war. The crews faced numerous dangers after the attack. Many fell into areas controlled by Japanese troops in China, while others were captured. Among those captured, some were executed, a brutal reminder of the human cost of war. Still, the stories of these teams' courage and resilience continue to inspire. They knew that the success of the mission went beyond what was visible on the battlefield. The mission was initially intended to cause a psychological impact, but the execution also revealed American tenacity and capacity for improvisation. The Doolittle Raid was not only a show of force, but also a clear sign that Japan would need to redirect resources towards its defense. It was just the beginning of a sequence of events that would change the course of the war, something that would soon become even more evident. The Doolittle attack deeply shook Japan. For the first time, its territory, until then considered invulnerable, was reached by a foreign power. Confidence in the Japanese government and military suffered a considerable blow. To protect its cities, Japan was forced to redirect significant troops and resources, which had previously been used to consolidate its expansion in the Pacific. This weakened their offensive position, changing the tempo of American warfare on the battlefield. On the other hand, the crews who participated in the attack faced unimaginable sacrifices. Some aircraft ran out of fuel before reaching planned airfields in China, prompting their pilots to make forced landings or risky jumps. Many were captured by Japanese forces, facing trials, summary executions, or years of imprisonment in inhumane conditions. The human cost was high, but the legacy of his bravery inspired generations to follow. James Doolittle, the mission leader, initially thought the operation had been a failure, given the low material damage caused. However, he soon realized that the real impact was on morale, on both the American and Japanese sides. For his role, Doolittle received the Medal of Honor, one of the military's highest honors. He became a symbol of courage, and his leadership proved how well-executed strategies can alter the course of a war. For the United States, the attack was a message of resilience and determination. Domestically, national morale, shaken after Pearl Harbor, was restored. The American people saw in the Doolittle Raid proof that the war could be won, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The confidence generated by the success of the operation helped sustain efforts on the battlefield, fueling the nation's willpower to face the challenges that still lay ahead. Japan, in turn, was forced to reevaluate its strategy. Fearing new attacks, its leaders decided to bring forward expansion plans in the Pacific, culminating in the Battle of Midway. This strategic shift would ultimately become a turning point in the American war. The Doolittle Raid, although modest in immediate damage, laid the groundwork for events that would redefine the course of World War II. But the impact of this operation went beyond the battlefield. It shaped a legacy of resilience and sacrifice that still echoes in history. The Doolittle Raid left a profound legacy that transcended the battlefields of World War II. His boldness showed the world that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, creativity and determination could prevail. This feat inspired numerous later military operations, marking the beginning of a new era of air strategy. The decision to directly attack Japan influenced future campaigns and showed that wars are not won with numbers alone, but with innovative tactics. One of the most striking impacts was the change in Japanese strategy. After the attack, military leaders decided to intensify offensives in the Pacific, believing they needed to consolidate their position before the United States gained more strength. This thinking led to the fateful Battle of Midway, where the tide of war began to turn in favor of the Allies. This development highlighted how an isolated action can trigger a series of events of gigantic proportions. The participants in the attack were celebrated as heroes, but their recognition came with nuances. Many of the crew who survived spent years remembering the sacrifice of those who did not return. The annual reunions of Doolittle Raid veterans became occasions to honor the fallen and reinforce the bonds forged by the mission. These gatherings, held until the last survivors, were a mixture of pride and reverence, reminding us that the price of courage is often paid in blood. The operation also perpetuated a powerful example of leadership in times of crisis. James Doolittle became an icon not just for the attack itself, but for the way he inspired his teams to overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. His story continues to be studied in military academies and recounted in history books, serving as an object lesson that great leaders don't just command, they inspire. If you are looking for an inspiring work, I Could Never Be So Lucky Again, Doolittle's autobiography, is essential reading. The Doolittle Raid remains alive in the collective memory, being remembered in films, books, and military ceremonies. But more than a historical event, it symbolizes something greater: the human capacity to resist and reinvent itself in the face of adversity. The operation proved that even when the odds seem overwhelming, the combination of courage and ingenuity can create milestones that resonate for generations. And this is how his story continues to inspire new narratives of overcoming and innovation.